Can you talk a little bit about why customer service and like what led you in this direction?
This is actually very driven by our customer. Number one thing that you were trying to validate is, am I building something that people will pay money for? And what we've noticed is
Ashwin Sreenivas, he's the co-founder of Decagon AI. Currently valued at $1.5 billion.
like a Notion or a Figma. You would never think about picking up the phone and calling Notion, right? You'd be like, oh, I want to like chat or email.
Are customers complaining about organizations? What has been the reality? It's also part of like customer trust.
Most customers, they don't want to talk to a human. They want their problem solved. How they want their problem solved, but they just want the problem solved. We didn't overthink, oh, what is the exact right 2-year strategy, or how are we going to build moats over 3 years? We said, okay, we'll figure all those things out when we get there. The only thing we're going to worry about now is how do we build something that someone will pay us real money for in 4 weeks.
How did you acquire your first, say, 5 customers?
I think customers think about value 2 ways primarily. One is,
welcome to Startup Project. My guest today is Ashwin Sreenivas. He's the co-founder of Decagon AI. Notable brands like Duolingo, Mercado Libre, Notion, Aura, and many others use Decagon's platform to automate critical support workflows. Ashwin was previously co-founder of Helia, which was acquired by Scale AI. We've been covering a lot of companies where, we're taking AI and solving a specific segment of a problem. And I think Decagon sort of fits in that categories where you're taking AI and solving a particular set of enterprise problem out there in a better way than we did before. In this conversation, I'm hoping to explore, how Decagon found product market fit. What is their secret sauce? What is the tangible business impact that they're delivering to their customer? So if this is the first time listening to Startup Project, don't forget to subscribe to us wherever you're listening to the podcast. Ashwin, welcome to the show.
yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So let's get right into it. What is Decagon AI? What does the product do? And talk a little bit about the technology behind Decagon.
Yeah. So you can think of Decagon as an AI customer support agent. So for our customers, Decagon talks directly to their customers and has great conversations with them over chat, over phone calls, over SMS, over email. And our goal really is to build these AI concierges for these customers. And this idea of AI for customer support is not necessarily new, right? Like you've had chatbots for 10 years now, probably. But I think the thing that's really different this time is if you look at the chatbots from, as late as 3 or 4 years ago, it wasn't a great experience, right? And the reason it wasn't a great experience is because you had these decision trees that everybody had to build, and it was a pain to build them. It's a pain to maintain. And then from a customer perspective, if you have a question or a problem that is, 1 degree off from the decision tree that was built out, it was completely useless, right? And that's when you had people saying agent, agent, agent. And I think the thing that's changed and a lot of the core of what we built is we built a way to kind of train these AI agents like humans are trained. So humans have standard operating procedures that they follow, and AI agents have agent operating procedures that they follow. So we're able to essentially build these AI agents that can have much more fluid, natural conversations like a human agent would.
Talking a little bit of the products, you mentioned chat, phone calls, emails. Do you have products for everything? Or if a company is coming to use or adopt Decagon, are they first starting with chat and then increasing to everything else? Or like, how does the customer journey look like?
Yeah. This is actually very driven by our customers, right? So for a lot of the more tech native brands, right, think like a Notion or a Figma, you would never think about picking up the phone and calling Notion, right? You'd be like, oh, I want to like chat or email. Whereas some of our other customers like Hertz, you don't really email Hertz. You're like, oh, I need a car. I'm going to call them up on the phone. So a lot of our kind of deployment model is guided by our customers and how their customers want to reach out to them. But typically most customers start with, the method by which most of their customers reach out to them. And then they kind of expand to all the other ones. So for a lot of people, very common to start with chat and then expand to email and voice, or start with voice and expand to chat and email and so on.
I want to double click on that point. You mentioned the decision tree model. Like I think during 2015 or later, during that Alexa peak era, everyone was building chatbots, and I remember seeing the app ecosystem where you have to build, apps on Alexa, or even I think Microsoft had something like Cortana where you can build apps. And conversational bots, I think 2 or 3 years there were all the hype. and quickly, it got stagnated. That we realized that, okay, all we are doing is basically the same options that we used to give on our customer calls. So, press one for this, press two for this. We are just doing that on the chatbot, but you're giving a different series of decision trees, and you're defining a decision tree, and anything else you have basically an if else command line, and at the end there's a catch-all where you're actually driving it to a human to chat with it. I think that was sort of like the when we got quickly used to it, it was slightly an improved version of what we had, but we quickly sort of saw that, oh, this is the end of it, and it was not improved after that. Would companies, there are obviously a lot of players in customer support, and there are existing companies which are scaled during using this approach, using other approach, and a whole suite of tools. Do they have a specific edge on creating something like what Decagon is doing because of the existing data?
Yeah. No, I actually think, interestingly enough, because I think these, customer service bots went through a few generations of tech. Fortunately for us, the tech is different enough that you don't get too much of an advantage starting with the old tech. In fact, it's you start with a lot of tech debt that you then have to undo. Let's say 10 years ago, when you had to start with explicit decision trees, right, where you have to program every single line. And then about 5 years ago, you had the sort of Alexas of the world. And it was a little bit of an improvement, but essentially all that it did was it allowed a user to express what they want. They can come in and say, I want to return my order. And what the models were good at doing was detecting intent, right? Saying, I'm going to get this natural language inquiry that came in and classify it into one of, 50 things that I know how to do, right? But then beyond that, then everything becomes decision trees below that, right? So you got a little bit of a jump, but then not much more. The thing is now with these models, because you have so much flexibility, because you have the ability for these models like follow more complex instructions, follow, multi-step workflows, you can actually rebuild this from the ground up. It's not just you say something, you classify it into some intent, and then you get a decision tree below that. It is, we want the whole thing to be much more interactive because it's a much better experience for the user. So we had to kind of rebuild it from the ground up to say, okay, number one, how does a human being learn? How do you instruct a human on how to solve issues? You have some standard operating procedures that you follow, and you say, hey, if a customer asks to return their order, first you want to go check this database to see, what tier of customer they are, and maybe if they're a platinum customer, you want to have a more generous return policy. If they're not, you want to have a slightly more strict return policy. You need to check the fraud database to make sure that this customer hasn't been flagged for fraud before. You need to go through many of these steps and then actually work with the customer to get that return happening. So the core of what we've done is kind of build out AI agents that can follow instructions very well, like a human does.
So I think this whole concept of AOP that you guys have introduced is very fascinating. So you mentioned SOPs, which humans read and understand, and then you have AOPs, which is sort of you're telling the agent what it should do in different scenarios, sort of like a protocol for the agent. Then who is converting the SOP into AOP? How easy it is to actually, create this agent? Are you giving a generic agent which adapts to a SOP of a given customer, or I, as a customer, go ahead and some sort of, I have to build the agent?
Yeah. No, so the core Decagon product is we've built an agent. We've built one agent that is very good at following instructions and AOPs, right? And so the reason we built this is for time to value, right? Like if you have to train an agent from scratch for every single customer, it's going to take a lot of time for that customer to get onboarded because you need to like fine tune a whole bunch of models from scratch. And two, it's very difficult for that customer to then iterate on their experiences, right? Because every time you change something, you have to refine tune something. Whereas if you build one agent like a human that's very good at following instructions, they can come to that customer and they're like, oh, here are the instructions I need to follow. You can be up and running immediately. Now, in terms of how these AOPs are created, most customers tend to have some set of SOPs already. And AOPs are actually extremely close to these SOPs, right? The only thing that you need to change is you need to instruct it on how to use a company's like internal systems, right? So it's 99% English And then there's a few keywords to let it say, oh, at this point you need to call this API endpoint to load the user's details. At this point you need to issue a refund, and the way you issue a refund is using the Stripe endpoint and things like that. So that's kind of the primary difference from SOPs, because you need to point it to specific internal systems. But other than that, it's almost entirely in English. So it's the lift and shift is very, very straightforward.
If we talk about like the the stack, the technology stack that you're building, you have the models, which I'm assuming you're using external models and you're not training your own models. But correct me if I'm wrong. And then your top of that, you're building this sort of like some version of fine-tuned model that is really good at answering or doing customer support. Is that the way to think about this? What you're doing, or what is the steps after? Okay, there's a model, but then what is the difference between a model to what you're delivering to a customer, and what kind of sauces you're adding into it?
Yeah, so we spend a lot of time thinking about models. So we do use some external models, but we also train a lot of models in-house. And the reason we do this is because if you're using external models, most of what you can do is through prompt tuning, right? And we found that models are only so steerable just with prompt tuning. So we've spent a lot of time in-house being like, okay, how can we take open source models and fine tune them, use RL on top of them, and use kind of all of these techniques to steer them to do the things that we want. So we use a mix of both. And the interesting part, the way you get these models to follow instructions well, is to kind of decompose this task a little bit, right? Saying, okay, I have a customer coming in. They've had this question. Now I have all of these AOPs that I could potentially select from. So decision number one is any of these AOPs relevant? If a user is continuing the conversation, okay, are they continuing the same topic, or should I switch to another AOP? So at every step, there's kind of 100 micro decisions that you need to make of, oh, did the user change their mind? Do I need to go back to an earlier step? Or are they continuing, in which case I can proceed? Did they just completely change the topic, in which case, I should go to another AOP? Do I need to undo decisions that I made before? So a lot of what we do is kind of break down these micro decisions that the AI agent needs to make, and have models that are very, very good at these.
I think one of the industry narrative has been that only the companies with very large capital chest can actually do training. So the OpenAIs and the Anthropics of the world, or the Microsofts and the Googles of the world can train models. And the estimate was in a couple of years more companies can actually train their own models. So are you seeing that cost drop down? Or when you mentioned you're also trying to train open source models, are you seeing that cost being more accessible now? Like if so, like on what order are we looking at?
Yeah, so we're not pre-training our models from scratch. We take open source models and then do things on top of those. And I think the thing that has changed dramatically is that the quality of the open source models has gotten so good that this is now viable to do pretty quickly.
Which
So
models are you like not are better than for your use case?
Yeah, we use a whole mix of models for different things, because we found that different base models perform differently for different tasks. So the Google Gemma models that were just released are great at very specific things. The Llama models are great at very specific things. The Quen models are great at very specific things. So even for one customer service, one message that comes in, it's not one message goes to one model and that's it. It's one message goes to a whole sequence of models, each of which are good at doing different things to finally generate that final response to the customer.
The other thing that is sort of like has been debated is for anyone who's sort of like fine tuning or doing more of post training things, or like doing specialized things for their category or for their industry, or something that is very you bring unique data and do more post training on top of existing models. The argument has always been like the bigger models will get those capabilities as we train bigger and better models, whether it's GPT-5 or Gemini. Like GPT-5 is maybe slightly better at thinking, and some other model is better at something else. Like what has been the reality on what you're seeing? Because you guys really are looking at specific things that you want from out of these models for your use case?
So I actually would push back against that argument. And there's two reasons why. So number one, this idea of, yes, the bigger models are all going to have these capabilities. I think they'll all have the capabilities, but I think the level of performance will change. I think it is, if you have a well-defined task, you can have a model that's like 100 times smaller, have a higher degree of performance if you just fine tune it on that one task, right? You're saying, I don't want you to know how to, code in Python and write poems in 20 different languages. I just want you to get really good at this one task. And then when measured at that one task, it will probably outperform models 100 times its size, right? So that's number one, which is you can actually get to better performance, right? Like maybe, this will do better than uh, GPT-5 today, and when GPT-6 comes along, it might be a little bit better. But as of today, it's going to perform better, right? Based on what we have available. And number two, which is actually equally, if not slightly more important, is latency, right? If I have a giant model, it's going to take a lot of time. And by a lot of time, I mean, maybe 5 seconds to kind of generate that response. Whereas if I have a really small model, that time is cut by a factor of 10. And there are certain, in certain situations, like when you're chatting over text, 5 seconds might not matter. But if you're on a phone call, if you say something and it's silent for 5 seconds, that's a really bad experience. So we care about latency a lot as well, and for that you kind of have to go toward the smaller models.
Someone said to me this, like, what a system prompt really is basically converting a larger model into a small model, because you only want you care about certain parts of the model. So I thought that was an interesting framing. Can you talk a little bit about, why, you and your co-founder picked customer service as a segment when you decided to start a company? Like, why customer service, and like what led to in this direction?
Yeah. So when we started this company, this was around the time when GPT 3.5 Turbo was out, GPT 4 was out. And we were looking at the capabilities of these models, and we're like, wow, this is now getting just about good enough that it can start doing things that people do, right? And as we looked at the enterprise, we were like, where is there a lot of demand for like text-based tasks, very repetitive text-based tasks? And we were like, number one is customer support teams, and number two is more generally like operations teams, right, where you have large groups of people just doing repetitive work. And as we talked to a lot of these like operations leaders, the number one demand from them was in customer support, because they're like, look, we're growing so quickly. Because of that, our customer support volume is scaling really quickly, which means we need to hire a lot more people to stop all this demand, and we can't afford to do that. We are desperate. We really need something here. And initially, it looked like it was a very crowded space from the outside. But as we went in and started talking to a lot of these customers, the thing was, it was very crowded for smaller companies that were buying that had simple tasks that 90% of their incoming volume was, hey, I want to return my order, or something like very simple like that. But for more complex enterprises, like there wasn't anything that had been built that could kind of really follow their very intricate support flows. And so that kind of wedge in was what we took to say, okay, we're just going to build exclusively for companies that have these very, very complex workflows. And number two, the other thing that was interesting was, longer term, the way that we were thinking about this was, if you build an agent that can instruction follow very well, the thing that you enable businesses to do is start saying, okay, today I'm going to use this for customer support, but I can eventually start growing this into a customer concierge, right? And then what I mean by that is, let's say you want to fly from San Francisco to New York next weekend, right? What you would do is, you would go to your favorite airline's website, you would type in, I want to go, San Francisco to New York, Friday through Sunday, one ticket, you hit search, it gives you, 30 different flights that you can pick from. You look through everything, you're like, okay, these two are the right time, but this one's too expensive for me. You pick one, you pick your seats, you fill out your information, and you hit purchase, right? It's a lot of steps. That's annoying. However, a much better experience for you would be if you had your favorite airline's phone number that you could text, and you say, I want to go to New York next weekend, Friday through Sunday. And they had an agent on the other side, an AI agent, that it knows who you are. It knows what your preferences are. It knows what times you typically like to fly. It knows your budgets. And it looks through everything and says, hey, here are two options. Like, which one do you like? And you say, oh, the first one. And this AI agent also knows where you like to sit. And then it just responds and says, oh, okay, by the way, I have a free upgrade available for you in premium economy in the window seat near the front. Is that okay? You say yes. And it says, okay, booked. The big difference is, one, this is a much more seamless experience. And number two, there's this shift that happens, right? Where most websites and web apps today shift the burden of work onto the user, right? It basically gives you all the tools for you to book a flight, and then you have to go do all the work to do that. Whereas now it shifts to this world where you express your intent to an AI agent that then does the work for you. And that was a really, really interesting shift for us. And, building these customer support agents, in our view, is the first step to building these broader customer concierges for all companies, where this can become one of the primary ways in which now customers interact with your business or service.
I think this is almost the extension of the prediction of almost like, at some point we used to have this narrative that Prime will predict what you will need in future, right? So it's almost the same thing, because you've seen, like, even in the example that you've given, exactly, what are the things other customers, if you're an airline company, exactly what are the patterns that the other customers have taken, and you learn from those patterns, and you can almost suggest what are the 2 or 3 things, and I can just, it shows up as a notification, and I can select between the 3 options. It's almost a little bit scary, but also like, yeah, there's also a predictable nature of finding these patterns, because, the repeatable customers, or as you as a customer has done this before. So the airline company can basically tell you what are you going to do next, and basically suggest your options based on that. In some form, we're getting to that place.
Yeah, I would think of it more as, instead of predicting what you want, it's more of learning what you like and remembering, so that your experiences are more seamless, right? So instead of, guessing I want a flight, it knows that, hey, all of these 10 flights that are available, Ashwin typically does not like taking red eyes, so I'm going to remove these. He doesn't like flying at 6 a.m, so I'm going to remove these. And these 3 are way too expensive, so I'm going to remove them. And okay, there's 2 options, and Ashwin probably like both of these, so let me just recommend them to him and see which one he wants. So it's a lot of this manual work that otherwise I would have to do that gets kind of done on my behalf. So I think there's going to be a big shift, in terms of the way that businesses kind of design websites, design web apps, to, rather than saying, here's a bunch of information, you user have to now make all the decisions, to, hey, you're going to tell us what you care about one time, and then our AI agents will remember and then work on your behalf to, just tell us what you want and we'll do the work and kind of give you the service that you want.
Can you talk a little bit about, we talked about like how you got into like customer service as a space, but how did you acquire your first, say, 5 customers?
Yeah.
How did that journey look like, and how fast did you convert them like a free design partner to a paying customer?
Yeah. So, early customer acquisition is always, it's always very manual. There's unfortunately no, you know, silver bullet and, fun hack that we did to scale. It was just a lot of, find everyone that in your networks, get introductions to good companies. We did a lot of cold emailing and cold LinkedIn messaging. It's just brute force work to do it. But the other thing for us is, in the early days, we never did free design pilots. We charge for our software from day one. Now, of course, this doesn't mean, we charge them on day one of the contract. We typically said, okay, there'll be maybe a 4-week pilot that we'll give you, because we're such an early company. We're going to give you a 4-week free pilot. And at the end of 4 weeks, we're going to decide upfront, if you like it, this is what it's going to cost, and this is, how much you'll pay. So we never had an open-ended, long-term period where we did things for free, because if you recall, in the early days, the number one thing that you were trying to validate is, am I building something that people will pay money for, right? And you might not have built the product. You might not have built the product entirely, but if this is something that's truly valuable, you should be able to talk to your potential customer and say, hey, if I accomplish A, B, and C, will you pay me this much in 4 weeks from now? And that should be something that, if it is truly something valuable, they should say yes to. If it is truly a problem that is so painful, they should say, yes, if you can solve this problem by doing ABC thing, I will pay you, and I will pay you this much. So what this does is it removes the cohort of people that don't really care that much about your problem, because if you ask them to pay you a reasonable amount of money in a reasonably short period of time, the people that actually don't care about the problem will just quickly tell you. They'll say, okay, actually, you know what? It's not that much of a problem for me. I don't need this. So that helped us kind of weed through, bad business models and bad initial ideas quickly.
I want to talk a little bit about business impact for your customers, when you're using Decagon, right? You mentioned, if for the initial customers, you promise, we'll deliver A, B, and C. And, if we were able to do that, do those things, then we'll propose some kind of pricing model. How do customers now look at, what is the success metrics that, your customers look at, or you look at whether this customer is being successful on Decagon or not?
Yeah. I think I think customers think about value in two ways primarily. One is, what percentage of conversations are we able to handle ourselves successfully, right? Which is not, I'm going to frustrate the user, but the user is satisfied and we have actually solved their problem, right?
Yeah.
Because if we can solve a greater percentage of those things, fewer percentage of, a fewer number of support tickets ultimately make their way to human agents. And now these people can focus their time on the more complicated problems, getting them support faster, things like that. But the second benefit, actually, that has been a little counterintuitive to us and was somewhat interesting, was a lot of these companies then expanded the amount of support that they offered, right? Which is, before, it's not that companies want to minimize the amount of support that they offer, right? Like, they want to give as much support as they can economically, right? And so before, if it cost me, $10 for one customer interaction, and all of a sudden that has become 80 cents, instead of, I as a business, I'm not saying, okay, now I'm going to, just save all that money, but I'm going to reinvest some of that in providing more support to my end customers. And what we've noticed is customers, their end customers actually want that increased level of support. So now, rather than saying, okay, support is only from, the phone lines are only from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, it becomes 24 hours a day. Instead of saying we only offer, support to paid members of this tier, we offer support to everybody, right? So there's this kind of latent demand for increased support. And by making it much cheaper, businesses can now offer this more, because at the end of the day, this leads to, higher retention, like better customer happiness. And like, every time a customer feels a slight paper cut, if you're there to like solve their problem quickly, that customer is likely going to retain longer, stay longer, be a happier user.
I think support also is like a brand destination, right? Like, a lot of companies really take their support very seriously and provide extraordinary amount of support. And you can almost attribute the success of Amazon to a little bit for this, right? And because of their extraordinary investment and support. Like, you can quickly get access to Amazon support versus like, try getting support from a different e-commerce website. So the support has been also like a very big brand differentiator, especially as you go, the price point increases, support actually, becomes much more almost like a thing that builds your brand and customer trust over long term.
And I agree. It's like, especially to take that example, right? Like, I think Amazon's a great example, because I feel very comfortable buying things on Amazon, because I know if there's a problem, Amazon will take care of me quickly without any hassle, right? Like, if I have an issue with something I bought, I know 2 clicks and they will refund me the item. I think another great brand example, this is American Express, right? Like, American Express is known for incredible customer service. So yes, completely agree that I think this will increasingly become a big part of like brand differentiator, which is, if my customers have a problem, I will be there, I will fix the issue. I think it makes people feel a lot better.
Yeah, absolutely. So the other thing that you have support for is voice agents, right? And I think voice agent is a particularly interesting one, because the models have really gotten good at identifying voice and creating voice in the last couple of generations, especially in the last 3 years. So talk a little bit about how has the traction been with voice agent, are customers complaining about voice agents? Are customers praising voice agents? What has been the feedback like? And do customers realize that they're talking to, because now we're almost past that Turing test of,
Yes.
certain voice agents are really, really good in terms of imitating human behavior. So like, are there any specific techniques where you sort of push into the model saying that we can identify this as a non-human? Because that's also part of like customer trust, right? You also
Yeah.
don't want to tell them that you're speaking to a human while you're not, right? That's
Of
because some
course.
brands might want it.
Yeah, no. So in general, all our voice agents say, "Hi, I'm a virtual agent here to help you," or something like that. But I think the other interesting thing is most customers that are calling in about a problem, they they don't want to talk to a human. They want their problem solved, right? Like they don't care how they want their problem solved, but they just want the problem solved.
Right.
And for us, making it sound more human is not because we want to, give the user the impression they're talking to a human or anything like that. It's to make the interaction feel more seamless, right? Like you want the responses to be fast because it's kind of annoying to say something and then wait 5 seconds to get a response back. Um, but at the end of the day, the primary goal is just how can we solve the customer's problem? Because even if the customer, let's say the customer is very aware that I'm talking to an AI agent, but that AI agent solves their problem in 10 seconds, that's a good experience. Versus if I know I'm talking to a human and the human takes 45 minutes, that's a bad experience, right? So the main factor here is not whether it's human or AI, it's can they solve my problem for me, number one. And two, were there a lot of paper cuts? Did I have to say something and then wait 5-10 seconds every time? So if you can make it a seamless experience and the problem gets solved, I think at the end of the day, customers are happy. And we've actually seen this. We have actually several customers now where the the NPS for the voice agents is as good or higher than human agents, because if if the AI agent can solve their problem, it solves it immediately, and if they can't, it hands it over to a human immediately, right? So either way, you end up having a reasonably good experience.
I think there was this interesting case where Klarna did, where they almost removed the entire customer service department, but then they rebought it, and they said they went too extreme. Like, has there been like a drop in hiring in customer departments or support departments, or what has been the trend in terms of like pure, agents versus human? Are agents replacing humans, or are we adding it to it, or are we getting? I mean, I think we talked about this of like increasing support, but in general, when your CEOs of the companies are looking at their how much they're spending on support, are they looking at staying flat or reducing the count or increasing it? Like, what has been your experience?
Yeah, it really depends on the business, and like different people do different things, right? Because if AI agents can handle a bigger chunk of customer increase, then you can do one of three things. One, you can say, look, I can now handle more incoming customer support. So I'm going to keep everything else constant. I'm just going to handle more support volume, right? I'm going to put it on every page. I'm going to give support to every kind of member. I'm going to do it 24 hours a day. So your top line amount of incoming support will go up. But one, your customers have a better experience. And two, you can keep the number of human agents the same. Other people might say, look, okay, I'm just going to keep the amount of customer support I do the same. There's fewer tickets going to human agents. So now I can have those human agents go do other higher value things. So I can either have them, we're going to go through our high priority complex question queue more quickly, or these people are going to go to a different part of the operations team and do other kinds of things. It really depends on the business and their priorities on what they do with these extra agents.
So can you talk a little bit about, the UX of the product? Because I think one of the things that I observed then is that, I think initially when ChatGPT came out, everything is a copilot, everything is a chat, associated with an existing SaaS product. And I think we're starting to see that change, and sort of new first principle based thinking is coming in, different sectors based on the use cases that we're trying to solve. How does, and this also relates to the question of like agent. People have different definitions of agents, and what is the UX for you when someone is using Decagon, like, is it like a agent that is part of like goes and does its own thing in a browser kind of an agent, or is it more of like a workflow agent where you can, define certain number of steps, and, you can basically, if I get a call, do this. If nothing happens, then, call the agent, and there's a whole bunch of logic in between. Like, what type of agents are we talking about here?
Yeah. So you can think of Decagon as like interacting with Decagon is exactly like interacting with a human being from the end customer's perspective, and by customer I mean not Decagon's customer, but their end users.
Okay.
From their perspective, it is exactly as though they were talking to humans. So they're talking over a chat screen. They type in a question, a response comes back, and if they're on the phone, they say something, the AI agent's voice comes back. So it's not a we have a Copilot product as well, but in general, the vast majority of our customers are interacting with the Decagon agent like they would interact with a human agent. Now, behind the scenes, the way that Decagon works is, like I mentioned before, each business has a set of AOPs that these AI agents have access to. And the AOPs allow the agents to do different things, right? It'll help them refund an order, upgrade a subscription, change billing dates, and the 200 other things that you need to do inside a business. And the Decagon agent is just saying, okay, this question has come in. Okay, do I need to go and work through an AOP and work with the customer to solve this problem? And it just kind of executes the AOPs behind the scenes.
And if I think before, your product, when we have support teams, there's always a manager looking at support teams' activities at the end of the day, looking at all the tickets that come on. Right? Like, how does that now management of, or looking at what is happening day-to-day support look like on customer side, on your customer side?
No, this is a good question. There's been this kind of interesting shift, right? Which is now, rather than training new human agents, I've trained this AI agent once, and now it's going to do what it's going to do the things that I trained it to do correctly. But now my job becomes, how can I improve this agent very quickly, right? So actually, we ended up building a number of things in the product to say, okay, the AI agent had 1 million conversations this month. No human being can ever read through all of that. So we had to actually build a lot of product to support this new use case of, okay, what went well in these conversations? What went poorly? What feedback should I take to the rest of the business on how we should improve our products? What should I now teach the agent to do so that instead of handling 80% of conversations, it can handle 85% of conversations? So the kind of primary workflow of the support manager has changed a little bit from, oh, how am I supervising everything, to being more of an investigator, agent improver of okay, what didn't go well and how can I improve that? And what feedback should I take to the rest of the business about what our customers are telling us?
So the product is actually enabling the support manager to look at, okay, when we didn't perform, take that information and sort of reinforce to the agent that, hey, you have to change, either you're changing the AOP or are you changing?
Yeah, it's mostly, customers have all kinds of problems that they come in and ask about that you might not have thought of when you wrote out the AOP, right? And generally, if Decagon doesn't know what to do, it'll say, okay, to do this, let me connect you with a specialist, and it'll hand it over. But, over time, you don't want to keep handing it over if you see the same problem 100 times. So we had to build a whole other, second set of agents afterward to review each conversation and say, okay, I've seen this kind of problem that Decagon don't know how to solve. And then it kind of clusters all these things together and say, oh, this is the biggest cluster of things that are all relatively the same that I don't know how to handle. And it surfaces that to the support manager, and the support manager's job is now to say, okay, I see that Decagon doesn't know how to handle this kind of thing because we didn't teach it. And now let me, add a new AOP or adjust an existing AOP, or, expose a new internal service so Decagon can handle these things as well. So their job becomes identifying these things and improving.
And each customer, a mature customer, when you have a mature customer, you have a lot of learnings from that data, right? Like, are those learnings flowing back into your overall agent that you talked about, the Decagon agent that you are building, that sort of scales across the companies?
So we don't take learnings from one customer and do it to another, because most of our customers tend to be enterprises, and so we have very strong kind of data and model training guarantees on all these things. But the learning that we can take is what kinds of things people need these agents to do, right? So maybe one learning that we had early on was sometimes there is like an asynchronous task that needs to happen, right? It's like I need to kind of put this customer and say, hey, can you hold on a minute because I need to go do this other long running task. And back in the day, Decagon didn't have support for that. And we're like, oh, this kind of use case is important. So we need to extend the Decagon agent to be able to do tasks like that. So it's those kinds of learnings on how agents are constructed that we can take cross customer, but specific things we actually don't train, on, oh, how did this customer have great customer experience and then take it to another? Because for a lot of these customers, the way they do customer service is a big part of their like secret sauce and brand differentiator. So we have like very strong guarantees on kind of data isolation.
We talked about like the first 5 customers and how you acquired them. How are you acquiring your customers right now? Like, is it mostly word of mouth, or are you just doing the PLG motion? What is working and what's not working?
Yeah, I mean, we're a much bigger company now, so we have customers through, I would say, 3 big channels at the moment. Number one is referrals from existing customers, right? Like that's always the best way to do it, because for a lot of companies, support is not competitive, right? So support teams will often say, hey, we bought this thing, it's helping our support team, and they have a lot of other friends that run support teams in other companies, and they'll say, oh yeah, you should use this. So referrals are a big one, and those are always the best kind of customers to get, because they come in already having heard good things about you from a peer that they trust. Number 2 is just general inbound that we get, because people have heard of Decagon at this point, and they're like, okay, I either used it at somewhere else, I heard something about you, and they come inbound. And 3, we also have a sales team now that they reach out to people, they go to conferences, things like that.
So I was researching Decagon and looking at the product. One of the things I noticed was, eventually a lot of things that you do in support are common to sales. And some other categories in enterprise. Like, do you have plans to like extend this, or like purely as a business strategy, or like you have too much demand in the existing category, or how are you thinking about that?
I think both of those things are likely true. We have a lot of demand in the existing category, but also for a lot of our existing customers, we're starting to expand outside of just customer support. So a lot of our customers will come to us and say, okay, you've been having customer support conversations for me for 9 months now, so a lot about my customers. Now, can you help us do some growth use cases, right? Where, oh, we're launching this new product, and can you figure out who are all the people that talked about this, and reach out to them and say, hey, we had this thing, we have launched this new product that could solve this problem that you talked about. Would you like me to educate you on it, right? So now it becomes a growth driver for them. Inbound sales is very similar to support, right? Because instead of someone coming in and saying, I have a problem, they're coming in and saying, I'm trying to learn whether this product is good for me or not, right? So now you can start doing some inbound sales use case as well. But I think the most exciting use case for us, is definitely on the concierge side, which is, can you become one of the primary ways in which customers interact with the business? Because if the AI agent can do everything that your website can do, and it can do it in a more personalized way where the user has less friction because they're just saying, this is what I want, and the AI agent goes and does everything and just says, okay, I've done it all for you. That to us is very exciting, because you can create all kinds of kind of new, unique, personalized consumer experiences for people.
So both you and your co-founder had companies before, and I think you sold your company pretty quickly to scale AI. So how did the team dynamics, and basically the functioning or operating of the company change from your last company to now? And did AI, having more access to AI tools, like increase the pace? Because early stage pace is everything. And do you see like a difference between how you guys did in your previous companies versus now?
Yeah. I mean, definitely a lot of things changed between the previous company and now, just because, for both of us, we had separate companies actually. So for both of our, first companies, we were both, first time founders. We were figuring a lot of things out as we did it. I think the biggest thing that changed, and this was, in the very early days of the company, was how kind of driven by customer needs we were, right? Like, we didn't really overthink, what is the we didn't overthink, what is the exact right, 2-year strategy or, oh, how are we going to build moats over 3 years? We said, okay, we'll figure all those things out when we get there. The only thing we're going to worry about now is how do we build something that someone will pay us real money for in 4 weeks, right? Like that was the only problem. We didn't worry about, oh, was this a long-term moat that we could build? We didn't think about what the moat was, what the competitive edges would be. We just said, what can we build that someone will pay us money for in 4 weeks? And that actually has this nice property of simplifying the problem. And we learned that all the other things you can kind of figure out over time, right? So for instance, competitive moats. The way that we figured those out were when we sold a deal to someone in the early days, we'll say, okay, why did you buy us? Because you must have looked at ABC competitor. And then they would just tell us, they'll say, oh, this competitor didn't have this feature we needed. And oh, this competitor had this problem. And so that's why we picked you. And then we're like, oh, great. Now, so we should do more of that because clearly this is valuable for people. And so you kind of, you don't think of moats, you kind of build them up and you kind of build up these competitive advantages. So yeah, a lot of what we did, the biggest difference was in the early stage, we were just very, very driven by what are customers asking for, and we just did not try and over intellectualize things.
I mean, it's almost like you just listen to the market rather than put your own thesis on the market. Just do what market tells you and go in the direction the market takes you versus like you come up with a thesis and just try to force fit your thesis into the market and try to push that forward, that idea, and it doesn't work. But I think that's a good way of thinking about just in general product market fit. Just, if you can make money and if someone is willing to pay for something, that's the biggest sign of like, okay, there's a problem that needs to be solved.
I think there was a very old Mark Andreessen essay about this, which was, the good markets will pull products out of teams. The market has a need, the market wants to be fulfilled, the market will pull the product out of you.
Yeah, and also like the whole, I mean, AI has become such a big shift in terms of like a new shift that we can, or a new tool or a new platform, however we call it. Like there's so many new things that you could do. Versus like if 5 years back you would have started a customer support company, there are only few limited ways of how you can think about it and innovate about it, and the amount of value you can deliver with a demo or with building with a small team in 2 months is incredibly high. And if you're like a fast moving team, then you can compound it pretty fastly. I think that's a very big difference between like now and 5 years back. If I talk to a same customer support company that is newly started in 2 years down the line, I think the difference is much vast. And even like convincing customers, I think has been relatively straightforward because the value generation is, you can look at the product and say, oh, this is extremely valuable and naturally. And it's not just for Decagon, but like a lot of new companies, new products out there are showing value even within like 10 minutes of using it, right? So you can see where it goes on a monthly or a yearly scale pretty quickly, pretty intuitively. And I think that has been really magical to see, not even just with yours, but a lot of products out there. We're almost at the end of our conversation. I want to ask one quick question before we wrap up, which is, what's your favorite AI products that you use personally, at work or, in your personal life that are really amazing, that have been impressive for you?
Oh, I use a number of things that I like. So for instance, we use for the coding agents, I think, for copilots, I think Cursor and Windsurf are great. For background coding agents, Devin is great. You just tell it to go do something and it'll do a bunch of work for you. I like Granola for meeting notes. Like meeting notes are, I used to hate taking meeting notes, and now I just have to jot down things every now and then, and Granola does.
My favorite hack with meeting notes is I don't attend meetings where I think it's 50-50 and just download the transcript and chat with it. That like, I don't even have to look at the recording now. I just want to know first even works for me to go and look at the recording. But that's one of my favorite use cases recently. What else?
I think that captures most of what I do, because either I'm writing code or talking to people. And
that makes sense.
That has become 99% of my life outside of spending time with my wife.
Awesome. I think that's a good note to end the conversation. Thanks, Ashwin. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, great being here. Thanks for having me.